Tesla recently began selling an in-car karaoke microphone in China, and that seems like trouble considering how drunk you have to be to do karaoke.
Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, has Elon Musk lost his way by prioritizing humanoid robots, or are robots going to become our main form of emission-free transportation as they carry us from point A to point B?
A federal judge canceled oil and gas leases in the Gulf of Mexico, ruling that the Biden administration did not sufficiently take climate change into account.
The bill to clean up Canada's orphaned oil and gas wells will grow to $1 billion by 2025, said a spokesman. No problem. We'll just have a bake sale or something.
Ford is working on an escape room game that you can play in your Ford electric vehicle. General Motors also has an escape room game for the Chevy Bolt. It's called Get Out of the Car, It's on Fire.
All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So, James, here we are. It's episode 99 of the Clean Energy Show. Who'd have thought we'd make it this far?
Well, you know, Brian, I was thinking this morning that I did not. I used to I started numbering the files, 001, and I think we're not going to make it to triple digits. This is absurd. This is overkill. And here we are, about to turn over the odometer from 99 to 100 episodes over the span of almost exactly 2 years.
Yeah, are we going to do something special next week? Are we going to have something,
I'd like to, but what I don't know what we would do. I mean, the listeners could send in their well wishes and congratulations, but that never works for our show.
Yeah, or, suggestions about what we should do for number 100.
I think maybe we've come to the point where we should do the show drunk. One of these days we will do the show drunk, maybe next New Year's or something.
Sure.
One of these days. Oh, you can't drink. You don't. We'll give it to you intravenously if your digestive system rejects alcohol or something like that. Maybe a mist.
Sure.
So, Brian, I'm waiting for a call. My son remember we got him an old Honda Civic. He's 2.5 hours away back at university, and he barely made it there. He said there was a bump in his suspension. Now, it's a very old car. It's 20 years old, but it has a very low mileage and it's very reliable. Like 8 years of mileage or something like that. It's not that old.
Sure.
And so I actually went out and met him on a highway half hour north to check it out myself. And it was a big, problem. I couldn't figure it out. His uncle thought there might be some ice in the wheel well. That seemed credible to me because he was plowing into a snowbank in front of our house because the tractors clear the street right around the car, and he has to plow into what's left because he's been here for over a month and a half because of the delay of in-class learning. Anyway, he got to Saskatoon up north after 2.5 hours. Well, it was more like 4 hours of ordeal at night in the wintertime, and found out the tread had, in fact, separated from his tire. Now, I wanted to mention this because this is something I didn't know. When I went and got him, he had one bad tire, so we were going to see if we could fix the leak, and they said, no, this is terrible. It's a terrible tire. They showed us the cracks in it, and it was old. You see, the person who owned the car only went a short commute to work and back for all these years, and her parents owned it before then. It's just a situation where they said that the tires, they get old. And I thought, I don't trust tire places, but I trust these guys now because they were right. And they said, okay, well, get another tire as soon as you can. And we'll put them both on the front where it's most important, because if they blow on the front, that's bad. I said, sure enough. Well, I said the trek for tire separation. I looked up pictures, tread separation. Basically, the tire kind of just falls apart due to age. So they wanted to sell us winter tires, but they were also old, and I said no. And their mechanic said no, they're fine. And I read the internet and said no, and I didn't want to insult my friends because they're good friends of mine. You know how things can get weird when you're buying something off of somebody, and then so they were happy. They claim they're happy that I didn't take them, but I'm glad I didn't. Not that they weren't a good deal. It's just that, tires only are good for 7 or 8 years and then they're not safe anymore. So now, just as we speak, he just rolled into Canadian Tire in Saskatoon to get his tire changed. He had to go over a bridge And, like there was wires sticking out of his tire. Like it was bad, bad, bad. And he didn't want to put on the spare. And I was saying, you don't want to go over a bridge and get stuck there and have to run in your rim to get out of there. And he did hold up traffic on the freeway, which is only 80 kilometers an hour, but he went quite a bit slower than that.
It seems to me you have a story from many years ago where you had to drive to Saskatoon in a Lada in only fifth gear. You only had fifth gear left.
Yes,
or
my
something?
brother. Both my brothers are strange, but one of my brothers was the nice one. He worked at a Russian tractor factory for a short time. In town here. I don't know where it was. I've never heard of it since, but apparently there was some sort of Russian tractor factory or assembly plant or something. And he was all, buddy with the Russians. And he decided he liked Ladas. So he bought like 3 of them. Ladas are a terrible car.
Oh, really? Yeah.
They're terrible. They're absolutely, they're incredibly simple. Like he goes out there and fixes it with a piece of wood sometimes or something like that.
Sure. But
they're terrible. And he bought me a Lada station wagon when I was just getting out of university. So I'd never owned a new car before. And this car was only, I think, 3 or 4 years old at most. So it was like my first brand new car. I'd never owned anything less old than a decade. It was like a new car. So I said, I'm going to take this on a trip. So I took it to Minneapolis, which was a long story because a friend of ours was making that film, Strike Me Silly. And he said, I got to shoot today. And I said, no, you're not. I'm going to Minneapolis. And he said, oh, come on, please. I decided I'm going to shoot today because I shoot once every August. And he shot over 4 August that show. And I threatened to lose weight. I finally did. And he had to use a body double for a cut-in shot of a bomb on my waist. Anyway, I did the movie and then I went to Minneapolis at night and I almost fell asleep. Anyway, and then I came back and I was nominated for my first TV award in Saskatoon. So I went there with my another guy from the station who was also nominated, and I broke it on the hill, Lumsden Hill. It's a big hill. It's actually a big hill. It's steeper than a lot of mountain passes. And yeah, I'd lost the transmission, only had 5th gear. And back then there wasn't GPS. So this was like 1992. Or 93 rather. And we were looking through maps frantically trying to see if we could make it to downtown at the hotel without stopping because we only had 5th gear.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that hill has wrecked multiple cars of ours. I'm just waiting for it to, it didn't do the electric cars, nothing though. Electric cars on those hills, poof, it's like butter.
We're flatlanders here. We're not used to changes in elevation. So there's this one hill that's the bane of your existence.
I have biked up it a couple times, or once actually, just once. And it was something. But my brothers used to do it all the time when they were teenagers. I finally did it in my late 40s, I think. So, yeah. So he just informed me that he arrived and he's getting a couple of tires. So I'm relieved by that because you don't want your kid going on the highway in the wintertime at night. And, just freak out because there's all kinds of terrible things happening. Hey, I heard something last night when I was watching coverage of the blizzard. We had a blizzard last night. I should point that out. An actual blizzard where you can't see anything. And I lost a chunk of siding off my house. Yay for me.
No, the way the snow was blowing around, it covered all of the cameras on my Tesla.
All of them. Yeah, it just coated everything because that's really unusual. A very powerful wind. Only 2 or 3 centimeters of snow, but it just completely was blowing around in the air constantly till it stuck to something. And so my partner's coworker, their power went out at 8 o'clock last night. Mine went out twice around 8 o'clock, and I said, "Oh no, when's it going to come back on?" But it came back on a minute later in both cases. Hers did not, though. And she's at a bedroom community about 45 minutes out of town, I would say. And in a new house, people in bedroom communities, they build nice new houses. Well, her power didn't come on till 10:45 this morning, from 8 p.m. to 10:45, because the power crews the highways were closed. Like, it was not safe. There was literally hundreds of people trapped on the highway overnight. Yeah, she took a picture of her thermostat and went down to 6 degrees Celsius or 42 Fahrenheit. And, I think my house would not do that. I'm kind of surprised that a new house wouldn't be the equality of my 1979 attempt at a passive solar house. I would think that the building standards would be that high, and I'm disappointed in that.
No, well, we've had, cheap fossil fuels for so many years. It's always just been cheaper to put in a furnace than insulation, which is horrifying.
Yeah. I think that's got to change, Brian. And, I would be particularly concerned in rural places where they're not going to get to you. It's fast. There's a lot more power outages. I would at least have a natural gas fireplace or a wood fireplace or something. Now we're trying to get rid of natural gas. But anyway, I heard something on the news last night as they were talking about some of the places that got caught.
Officers estimate 40 to 60 other vehicles are stuck in snow on the road, and Blaine Lake RCMP are reminding people to make sure that their tailpipes remain clear of snow in the event that they find themselves stranded in a blizzard.
Aha! Another point for electric vehicles. When we talked last week about this Washington Post article and this big kerfuffle over the Washington people stranded and how EVs, what if EVs, they were all EVs, they'd all be dead. Bull crappy. The fact is, this is one more danger, because in a night like that, when you have 100-kilometer, 90-kilometer winds blowing snow, you can get, if you're sitting there on a highway already stuck in a snowbank, your tailpipe can get covered up and you can die. Not in an electric car. Thank you very much, Brian.
No, I was on the sort of ring road around the city today, and there were 3 or 4 cars still in the ditch from last night.
Is that right?
The snow was deep. They definitely would have had the tailpipe would have been covered up for sure. So,
yeah, I live on the edge of town, and apparently the fire department had to rush out both north and south of the city on the Highway 6 and 2 bad accidents. And I feel for them because you can't see your nose in front of your face, literally. Like, you can't see anything. And it would be a very dangerous situation for them, for everybody, and for other people who might be coming on the highway. I don't know if their flares work or what, but so I suppose I could run my furnace off my car, my Leaf, with about a 20 kilowatt hour battery.
The electrical part of the furnace.
The electrical part of the furnace, yeah. But you're screwed if you are running a heat pump. You'd never be able to have the battery back up for very long to heat your home. It would take a great deal of storage to do that. That's one, negative thing perhaps as we transition away. But it wouldn't take much. Like, I got a DC motor and a fairly efficient furnace, and I could put just from a hardware store, like a power inverter on my 12-volt battery, leave the car running. I've seen other people do this. And then the traction battery, the big battery that powers the car, moves the car, would continually top up the 12-volt battery and power your supplies. So I could run some lights and a furnace and not die if I had to. Now, it would be tricky to wire that, especially with my solar panels and inverter. I don't want to break that I would maybe turn off the house breaker and, make sure no power gets out of the lines, turn off everything else and just the furnace. Or, if I was smart, I'd maybe wire the furnace that way, but I don't know.
Not to mention, you wouldn't want to do that in a blizzard.
Yeah, not in a blizzard, no. But I could, if I had an outlet on my house, I suppose I could run a 2-way cord to it and just get that into the grid in the house and leave just a couple breakers on, the one that goes to the driveway. I don't know. There's probably some electricians cringing right now as I come up with this phony. But it's some people will run generators in their house and die from that. That's actually a thing when blizzards hit, and a regular thing, especially when you don't do it every day. You do it for the first time and think it's a good idea, and it is not. Brian, speaking of natural gas, Europe's being held hostage by their dependence on Russian natural gas right now, with all the conflict over there, and chest pounding and so forth. And the price is also really high, unlike it is here, which we have fairly stable prices where you and I are. Yeah,
and we've talked about this before. Natural gas prices have been going up even before this kerfuffle with Russia. So, let's all switch to clean energy soon.
There's a fella on one of our local EV pages here on Facebook. The only really usefulness of Facebook anymore is for... there's a Tesla group, and there's a Saskatchewan local EV owners group, and then there's a national Leaf owners group, which I'm involved in. Lots of great information on there, and sometimes I can help other people. This fellow on one of the local EV groups said that he bought a Hyundai Ioniq 5, And if you're looking to buy one, they're not really available, even here. It's surprising that he must have pre-ordered and got on the first batch that they were making. And I asked them about the range, because he says the range is taking a big hit in winter. And he was looking forward to spring so that he could see what the full range of the vehicle was. Now, it hasn't been that cold when I asked him that. When he got the vehicle, it was -5 Celsius or something like that. Not terribly free. It wasn't -40 or -30s or even -20s. It was fairly warm. It was warmer than usual at this time of year. And I asked him if he knew that it would take a hit in winter, because I was kind of curious if because we're getting to the point where there's not educated, well-researched early adopters like you and I. It's just people going out and thinking that, they don't need to know anything.
Yeah, we're past the early adopter phase.
We're getting into the phase where people are doing that now. So I wondered, he said, yeah, he knew it would be less, but he didn't know how much. And then I asked him, did your salesperson know anything about it? And he says, my salesperson knew zero about the car, aside from the fact that it had 4 wheels. That's an issue. That's an issue, and it makes me angry.
Yes, but I will say this is a problem in every industry. It's not just in the car industry, but, ever since the internet became a thing, you can do 20 minutes of research before you go out to buy something. At Best Buy or anywhere.
I don't buy a hinge without going to do the research,
Exactly. And then as soon as you do that research on the hinge you want to buy for your door, you go to Home Depot, you go to Canadian Tire, and you instantly know more than anybody who works there about hinges.
That is so true. It's like, just shut up, kid. I know what I'm doing. I could engineer this hinge with a piece of iron myself at this point. So I thought it was interesting. Another person on one of the local groups said that they asked the tech at the Nissan dealership in town when they would be EV certified, and the guy says, when hell freezes over. Also makes me angry, Brian.
He literally said that?
He said that. Yep. See, we have I think about 3 or 4 in our province here, and only Nissan one way up north is certified. They got certified early because the owner wanted to have an actual Nissan Leaf and spend the money to get certified. It can cost $50,000 to $100,000 depending on what you're doing to have your shop do that. But that is denial, and they're coming in with the Aria. And by the way, I see people shopping for the Aria thinking the Nissan Aria is not good. They haven't announced the pricing yet exactly. It's not a very good vehicle. I mean, on paper, it's not competing with the Ioniq 5 and other things, and it's probably going to be the same price. I mean, I'll have things like ProPilot, the driver assist features. It might have some nice things like that, but overall, I'm a Nissan fan. I love my Leaf, and I would love to upgrade to an Aria or something just a tinge bigger. By the way, my Leaf has pretty good ground clearance, I've noticed. And they've closed some of the roads. The road to my kid's school, when I just drove at lunchtime, and it was closed out near the edge of town, which I've never seen before. So it's quite the blizzard we had last night.
Well, we'll see. I'm very curious. I mean, it's still early days for the Nissan Aria. We should maybe reserve judgment till we get more details.
All right.
I'd say.
All right, I will. But I'm getting very suspicious, Brian. At least for the price. I think it'll be a great car, just not for the price.
Yeah, and of course, we'll have to see the range and everything like that.
Now, you wanted to say something about light bulbs again?
Yeah, so we were talking about light bulbs last week, and I made an offhanded comment about planned obsolescence and the light bulb industry. So I just wanted to update. I did a quick Google and came up with this story on BBC.com, and it's about the notion of planned obsolescence. And here's the section about the light bulb industry. In the 1920s, the Phobos cartel was formed, wherein representatives from
Did you say 20s?
1920s, yeah.
Wow. That's really early on in light bulb, history to form a cartel. Okay.
This goes deep. And of course, there's that famous Edison light bulb that's been burning for over 100 years in that fire station somewhere. So we do know it's possible to make incandescent
bastards.
bulbs.
You're telling me there's a light bulb that's burning for 100 years and they chose to make them go kaput.
Okay, so the infamous Phobos cartel in the 1920s, wherein representatives from top light bulb manufacturers worldwide, such as Germany's Osram, the United Kingdom's Associated Electrical Industries, and General Electric in the U.S., via a British subsidiary, colluded to artificially reduce light bulbs' lifetimes to 1,000 hours.
I'm retroactively angry at the world, Brian. I'm retroactively angry at...
This happened 100 years ago.
That's even older than me. That's twice as old as me almost. So, bugger, I say. Kaflooey. It's hard for me to move on, but let's get the show started. It's time to play Elon Musk.
Elon Musk Cray or slay.
Now, we haven't gone this route for a long time because I know you're very sensitive as an Elon Musk fanboy. I don't want to offend you, but here we are, ready to put the needle into Brian here. Now, we'll start with the fact that he has made some political comments that say 90% of society are close to or not happy with, because he was supporting basically Canada's version of the January 6ers, except they've taken trucks to the capital of Canada and are, you know, they got Nazi flags, they're peeing on homeless people, they're saying racist things, they're doing racist things, and maybe that's not all of them, but they're not really generally being thought of positively, and Elon came out supporting them.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I've been trying to stay off social media because it's so depressing. But as you know, I've been reading newspapers from around the world. It's my hobby now. I like to pretend I live in other places. So I've been reading the New Zealand Herald. So
that's a George Costanza thing to do. It's like a whole episode of Seinfeld.
Yeah, I'm immersing myself. I can pretend I live somewhere else. So anyway, I'm trying to escape this news from social media because it's so upsetting. And here's the headline from the New Zealand Herald about Canada's protests. The headline is, "Swastikas on show as thousands rip COVID measures."
One swastika makes a big group of people look bad. But yeah, this is not a normal protest because there's trucks involved and honking and schools closed and... you know, they're actually stealing. If you haven't heard of this outside of Canada, they actually went to a homeless shelter and tried to get soup. And they did. They got soup because they were mad, maybe hangry, but they took soup from homeless people. And then the shelter, it's okay because the shelter got a huge donations afterwards.
But here's the odd thing about Elon Musk's support, and I'm sure he would denounce swastikas if he was aware of that. But we had a similar protest in our city, and a lot of big, giant pickup trucks, like there's semis in a convoy, but also the giant pickup trucks. And so I saw them all over the city, and I thought, hey, that looks exactly like the giant pickup truck that coal rolled me on the highway when I was driving my Tesla.
Nice. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. Yeah. I'm sorry. You know, when I went out to help my son on the highway, these yahoos were all fleeing town, going back to wherever they came from. And yeah, there were some tractor trailers. They're ostensibly protesting the fact that they have to be vaccinated to go across the border, but most of them weren't tractor trailer drivers, so it's not even possible that they're doing that because most of them weren't pickups. Like a slight majority of them weren't pickups or other vehicles. Yeah,
90% of truck drivers are vaccinated, and this is a vocal minority and other hangers-on.
And I didn't need that with my son broken down on the highway and all these jackasses honking at each other. So Elon has also said, Brian, that he's going to make in answer to the question, what's your priority this year? Is it the Model Y? Is it new factories? It is a freaking humanoid robot. An Alexa with feet. I don't know. That worries me because, you know, okay, let's go back to the trucker thing. Here's the thing about the trucker thing. If he's supporting someone like Joe Rogan, who, by the way, does not have a podcast, he has a digital radio show because it's not on RS.
If it's not available on all podcast apps, it's not
technically not a podcast. Sorry, Joe, rich bastard, got $100 million. We've only been offered like 15, and we had to turn them down for ethical reasons.
Sure.
But, you know, Joe Rogan had a climate change denier on from Canada. This guy my son's obsessed with, the prof that he was University of Toronto prof. I think he just decided to leave. Anyway, he's now he's a psychology guy or something like that, and he's an expert on climate now. So and telling us why climate is bogus. So if Joe Rogan believes that, and Elon Musk likes Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk likes truckers, that's a concern, because what happens if Elon changes his mind about the climate being a priority? Because that's what got us here and is helping the climate so incredibly importantly. What happens if that changes? Will it?
Well, you'd have to shut down the company. I mean, Tesla's going to, reduce carbon emissions even if it tries not to. Like, they're just making so many cars. Yeah. I don't think they're going to reverse course. But yeah, the Joe Rogan podcast, it sort of reminds me of high school. It's like when we would sit around in donut shops talking shit and not really know what we're talking about. But, you speak with authority when you're a teenager, like you're smart and you know everything.
Yeah.
But the difference being is that, he's got millions of listeners.
He just strikes me as dumb. Just
well, there's that too. Yeah.
A light IQ in that fella. I've listened to him for interviews and they were kind of interesting when there's somebody I wanted to hear about, but he's not a brain surgeon, that guy. He's just not.
No.
But do you think that Elon's priority on robots means anything, or is it just what he's most excited about?
It's what he's most excited about. It's the natural offshoot of the full self-driving that they're doing. It seems like something that could be ported to the robots. So, it makes sense for them to do it, but it's not going to affect the car business. The car business is growing in leaps and bounds. So, the robots are just the next step, and they're in themselves, I don't know, probably neutral in terms of the climate. I mean, I guess if robots can walk around doing jobs, they won't be needing to drive.
They don't need air.
Cars. They don't need air. Yeah, that's always a bonus.
They need the sun to probably replenish their power supplies, stuff like that.
But it was the Tesla fourth quarter earnings call last week, and this is where some of this stuff went down, where Elon's not normally on the calls anymore, but he's like, I'm going to be on this earnings call to give a product roadmap. So everyone got real excited, like, oh, the Cybertruck, oh, the $25,000 car. And he's just like, yeah, we're going to do robots now. And so the stock immediately tanked because it was not the news that Wall Street was expecting, but it has recovered somewhat.
Well, let's talk about that. They're talking about not prioritizing the semi-truck or the Cybertruck or the $25,000 mysterious yet to be developed Tesla, which is something we've all been wanting to see, all three. I'm less anxious for the Cybertruck now that there's actually a truck on the market, like being sold right now from Rivian, and Ford F-150 is a few months away. What does it mean that the Tesla, the Semi, is going to be delayed? Well,
the gist of the whole thing is they're still parts constrained, and the interesting thing from the call was battery cells are no longer their main limit. The main limit right now is chips, the worldwide chip shortage.
I can't believe that.
So, but that was actually big news that kind of slipped through under the radar. The fact that they actually have enough batteries now, which has never been the case in Tesla's history. They've always been short on batteries. So, but yeah, you can't expand the company if you don't have enough parts. If you don't have enough chips to make all these other vehicles, like the 25,000 or even the Cybertruck, then they're not going to do it. So, they have such immense demand for the Y and the 3, which are already in production. It wouldn't make sense to slow that down and build these other cars. So it's unfortunate, but we should, start to see the Cybertruck in a year and a bit.
This is the Clean Energy Show.
So, news from Australia. This is via Clean Technica, which was reporting on a story from Renew Economy, an Australian website. Tennis Australia has announced that it has ended a sponsorship arrangement with oil and gas company Santos early. The sponsorship deal covered Santos's logo being featured in on-court signage at the ATP Cup and the Australian Open. It was supposed to run for multiple years. It started last year, and they've decided to kill it because they don't want to support fossil fuels.
I wish this would happen more often. It's very encouraging news, and it makes me happy. This podcast often has positive news on it.
Yeah, no, this is the first of many. I mean, it's pretty much a direct mirror of what happened with the tobacco industry. Eventually, they were stopped from sponsoring things, which, I mean, advertising was killed first for tobacco. They weren't allowed to advertise in many places. Yeah. And then they were like, oh, okay, we're not allowed to advertise. We're going to do sponsorship. So all of these sporting events and stuff or concerts were sponsored by tobacco, and that slowly went away.
Well, that's great to hear, and I hope it continues, and I hope that people continue to divest from fossil fuels as well, and lobby to put pressure on your bank to divest and pension funds and things like that. And if we do that, it's going to be very encouraging. And I also wanted to tell you about something that is kind of related in a way, because it's something that we're seeing more and more of, and that is legal challenges to oil and gas. So a federal judge on last week canceled oil and gas leases of more than 80 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico, ruling that the Biden administration did not sufficiently take climate change into account when it auctioned the leases off late last year. This is from the New York Times. And the decision by the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, which is fun to say, is a major victory for environmental groups that criticize the Biden administration for holding the sale after promising to move the country away from fossil fuels. It had been the largest lease sale in United States history, believe it or not. And now the Interior Department must conduct a new environmental analysis that accounts for the greenhouse gas emissions that would result from the eventual development and production of the leases. And after that, the agency will have to decide whether it will hold a new auction. And yeah, so this is a case of Biden making a promise and not living up to it. And also he had court rulings that sort of ruled against him and were forcing people to do it. And then the environmental groups came back with their own angle to the law. And they put a stop to it, which is encouraging. So I think environmental groups, big oil is daunting, like big tobacco. I don't know if it's worse than big tobacco. We all know how big tobacco, one of my favorite movies is The Insider, and it was just relentless, their legal departments and private investigators and all their techniques. So it's encouraging to think that people are winning cases against the fossil fuel industry.
But yeah, fossil fuels probably has even deeper pockets than tobacco, so it's not going to be an easy fight. Yeah, so Ford, this is a story from Electric. They made a demo of a game where you can basically do an escape room in your Ford electric vehicle, like a Ford Mustang EV. And, there's clues that appear on the screen and stuff. And I mostly wanted to talk about it just so I could make that joke off the top of the show about Chevy Bolts catching on fire. But I do think it's an interesting development because, of course, Tesla's at the forefront of this. They've got the giant screen in the car and it has gaming capabilities. There's lots of games available for it. But this is the future of cars. Like it seems probably strange to most people who aren't thinking about autonomy and the future of cars, but cars are going to become very different things, and gaming is going to be, surprisingly important, I think, to the future of the automotive industry.
So if you don't have your briefcase there and you're not working on your work as you go to work in your big office tower somewhere, maybe you want to be occupied.
Yeah.
If you're not checking TikTok.
Yeah, and gaming is already it's a bigger industry than the movie industry. So yeah, this is all massive.
So this is a good opportunity for me to ask you about Elon Musk's comments about autonomy. He said you'd be very surprised that they didn't reach it at the end of this year, 5 years ahead of everyone else. I mean, I don't know what that means when there's other companies actually having vehicles driving around by themselves right now in cities as tests, or... I mean, can we believe him on this anymore?
Well, how many episodes ago was it where he said the full self-driving beta was coming to Canada in 2 to 4 weeks?
Yeah.
I think it's probably been about 3.
Mm-hmm. Good luck.
Good luck. So yeah, he's been promising it by the end of the year for about 5 years now, but it's got to happen sometime. I think we'll have a pretty decent rollout, I would think, a fairly wide, there's already 60,000 cars, apparently. This was a new tidbit also, too. Maybe that was from the earnings call. I can't remember, but we now know that there's about 60,000 cars in the U.S. that have the full self-driving beta. So it's a lot bigger than I thought it was. So, we're getting close.
Well, the more cars, the more data, and the more miles, and it trains the AI system faster and faster. Yeah. Will you get your car? See, my dream, of course, is that you've paid for full self-driving.
Yeah.
They would have to select you. I don't think you're a good enough driver because you have to have a good driving score. You know,
We'll
you
see.
could have
I
been
don't
paying
know.
attention, Brian. You could have been careful for the last few months, but no. As a
I
drive
mean, my
like a man
cameras
coming
are all
home from
covered in
work on the
snow. What am I
freeway.
supposed to do?
I don't know. Just try harder. But for the show, man, for the show, we need you to have a full self. Well, I'm still a little disappointed on the progress it's making. I thought that it would become self-aware and just start doing good things really fast. But yeah, I don't know. This is something that Nat Bullard from Bloomberg New Energy Finance pointed to on Twitter, and is a new study by Atlas Public Policy on total cost of ownership of EVs. And the EVs are now, across the board in all categories, beating gas equivalents. So internal combustion vehicles are costing more for the total cost of ownership, and they're doing it over an 8-year period. Some of the results are surprisingly bad for EVs. I'll just go through them one at a time, though. Let's start with the popular segment, the crossover. The Volkswagen ID4 is, this is in United States dollars, United States circumstances, okay? And they include things like taxes, insurance, maintenance and repairs, fuel, and, importantly, the purchase price minus resale price. So the Honda CR-V, like all Hondas, have a good resale price. However, they anticipated it in this case being lower than the EV version. I'm not so sure. Perhaps not. So anyway, the ID4 came in at $46,000 over 8 years, and that's everything. That's just the cost to have that vehicle and to use it as you would normally use it on average. And the Honda CR-V was $7,000 and change more. So yeah. That's pretty much $1,000 a year savings for that segment of car. That's today, hoping to see that get better. Okay. Now the Tesla is a bit trickier because it's technically officially, is it a premium car, a luxury car? It's not quite a luxury, but they often compare it to Lexus. So the Lexus ES250, this was only $2,500 improvement. And the purchase price minus resale was higher, but the resale on Teslas are really good. You know, that's one thing that I would always count on is, well, now they're more than sticker price, right? The used is ridiculous.
Yeah, the Lexus ES250, that's a pretty luxurious car, and a lot of Tesla owners, including myself, like, to me, it's like a Toyota Camry is more the comparison for me. Like,
really?
Yeah. This would suggest that my Tesla is cheaper than a Toyota Camry by probably quite a lot.
You know, when you do compare, you can't compare to the base Camry either, right? You need to do apples to apples as best you can. And the Tesla comes with way more than the Camry fully loaded premium version ever will. So yeah, that's probably why they're making that comparison. So let's look at low-cost sedans. We're looking at the Chevy Bolt against the Toyota Corolla, and that was about $3,000 savings over 8 years of the Bolt. However, what I'm concerned about is the resale value of that Bolt. Not only because they're rumored to be discontinued and getting rid of the whole fire thing in the brand. The car never sold as well as it maybe should have. It's not as sexy as some cars, and it's not as big as some cars. But I would probably lease. You know, that's my point. Because I was thinking, well, maybe the Bolt's the only car I can afford at this point. If I want to buy a new electric vehicle, that it would have to be leased, because I would worry about the resale on that, 5 years from now or something like that. Pickup trucks, this is the most interesting, because you remember the number one selling vehicle in North America is the pickup truck. And it's also one that we often think is the hardest to electrify. and also at least in North America, there's a countless fleet vehicles. Like there must be millions of them out there that are pickup trucks as part of different companies. Well, it's $8,600 saving. Now, for your average Yahoo going to protest people who aren't white and stuff like that, they're not going to care. But this, for a company, they're going to look at the balance sheet, and if you're in charge of the fleet, you're going to get a bonus like Christmas. If you can save, if you've got 100 vehicles, that's $800,000, right? So yeah, the Bolt is taking a hit on the resale, which is something they've done. And what do you think, Brian?
No, and the Ford, just to clarify, the electric Ford F-150 Lightning, which isn't even technically out yet, came out to $50,000 over 8 years, and the traditional Ford F-150, $58,000. So $8,000 less over 8 years for the electric F-150. And these are slight guesses too, because that vehicle's not even out yet. But the typical thing is cost more upfront, but cheaper in the long run.
I'm looking forward to it, and it's hopefully, I mean, there's going to be a crunch. They're talking about battery prices going up this year for the first time in basically the history of the modern EV because of supply and demand. And that could go into next year as well. So that'll be too bad, because we have been seeing up to 20% reduction in battery prices. They just can't make them enough, and that's the problem. But the investment in battery factories is going to be enormous now that there's such a huge demand, and that's going to eventually, in a couple of years, I think, really start to move battery prices down year on year.
Okay, so the Canadian press is reporting that the cost of cleaning up orphaned oil wells in Canada, and these are mostly in Alberta and Saskatchewan, where we live, is going to be $1 billion by 2025. But that doesn't include things like pipelines. That doesn't include the oil sands. That doesn't include 7,400 wells that are abandoned, but not yet orphaned. Apparently there's a difference. So there's already 10,000 orphaned wells and another 7,400 that are abandoned. And it's going to turn out to be way more than $1 billion. And the industry puts away a certain amount of money to cover these costs. But apparently it's only a few $100 million at this point. So these are pretty staggering figures that are just going to get bigger. And another stat, like the number of orphan wells in Alberta has grown from 700 in 2010 to now 8,600 in 2020. This is what's happening? Is the oil's just drying up? Is that what's going on?
Maybe they've just become too cheap to do it. Maybe they're just getting away with murder. Maybe because they think they can, they are. Maybe they had more ethics back in the day.
Well, and also two companies go out of business. So if you're an oil and gas company that goes out of business, it's like it's our problem at that point.
Yeah, and there was a gas downturn, oil and gas downturn. What was it? 2014 it went down. So a lot of companies went out of business. The United States started making a lot of their own oil cheap from fracking. And that changed the market around, and oil went down. Now it's up. It's like pushing $90 a barrel. So people are going to start investing in oil and, exploring for oil, which is bad. However, high gas prices will help people shift to EVs. So they don't really realize that's going to happen, but that actually helps us. I think it's a good time to help us, actually. It's debatable. But
it's a boom and bust industry, and I guess we're on the boom again right now.
So, Brian, 2025 is around the corner. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's less than 3 years from now. This is long before the oil industry goes kaput or is drastically downsized. This is just right now. This is like current day type of talk, and it's $1 billion. So
yeah, and I will say I have done some thoughts of some thinking about this. Like why is the oil and gas industry subsidized so much? Because this is what's getting us in trouble. Like, it's an industry that shouldn't be subsidized. It's been going for 100 years. It should be running on its own merits. But, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when we weren't so concerned about the planet burning up, it was a benefit to everybody to have this stuff flowing freely. So I can sort of see how it started and how it began, why there are these subsidies in place. But, it's 2022. And, we're still kind of operating on the thinking from 50 years ago.
Yeah, I saw listened to a podcast, What on Earth, talking about, the transition from natural gas to heat pumps. And, it was expensive for some people, but not for others. Like they found ways to do it, like a ground source heat pump that was vertical. Would heat 4 apartment buildings side by side, and it paid off that way just by using, the pipes to go from one building to another, and it wasn't that big of a deal to do per building. So I'm really looking forward to that taking off, heat pumps and things like that. That's on our TikTok page, which stirs a lot of feathers. I'm stirring a lot of feathers on our TikTok page. We're doing well. We're approaching 3,000 followers and 30,000 likes, but a lot of those people are pissed off. I think they might want to kill me.
Listen, TikTokers, I have nothing to do with that channel. Don't blame me.
You made me do it. So Electric has the reporting on e-bikes.
Yeah, so it turns out that in the United States, electric bicycles are now outselling electric cars and plug-in hybrids combined. So the figure is 790,000 electric bike imports in 2021. That's a 70% increase from the previous year. And there were 652,000 electric cars and plug-in hybrids sold. Now, obviously, electric bikes are cheaper, but that's not really the point. That electric bikes are you wouldn't know it from listening to this show because we mostly talk about electric cars, and you wouldn't know it from watching ads on television, which are just littered with electric car ads. But electric bikes are quietly outselling all of it with, very little advertising, very little hype surrounding them. But, that's really where the hype should be. Electric bikes are selling like crazy.
Yeah, and I wonder what their sales are compared to regular bikes. My nutritionist the other day said that she was going to get an e-bike. I felt embarrassed. I let it slip that I bought one because I'm supposed to lose weight and be healthy. But it came out, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to buy one too." So that's pretty mainstream when my nutritionist, when she buys one. As a person my age who's thinking about retiring as well. All these people my age retiring. Come on, people.
Yeah.
I haven't even started yet. I haven't got my first paper out. I gotta hurry up because I'm not going to live more than another week or two. It's interesting though, and I think e-bikes are going to come down in price too, because they're I think they have, for one, which is why they're taking off. They're at the inflection point now. They're making
and more players. More manufacturers, more competition.
They are a little bit harder to find, a little bit less selection, but you can get e-bikes fairly easily. And I'm hoping one day to get one for my partner so we both have the bikes because we kind of switch off now. That's the way that goes. Anyway, Brian, we're coming to the end of the show, and that means it's time. Can you guess what?
Is it the lightning round?
Yes, it is the lightning round. You know that we clean up the headlines every week at the end of the show with something called the lightning round. Plug-in vehicles are at a record 13.3% in Italy. We don't often talk about Italy. And also, hello to South Africa, because we charted down there last week. We have people in South Africa. Hello. And we haven't had any news on South Africa, so email us if you have South Africa news that is relevant to climate and technology in that area. So in Italy, 13.3%, and the car market down there is in crisis, though, for other reasons that I won't get into. The Porsche Taycan, that is the electric Porsche, sort of a crossover, has gone coast to coast in the United States. The Cannonball Run, if you remember the Cannonball Run movies, with just 2.5 hours of charging. Mind blowing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, they would have obviously had to plan the trip around the very fastest chargers available.
Yes, and this made a record for them too. And they did it in the wintertime, so that might have had something to do with it because you charge slower once the battery starts to overheat. I don't know where they did it, but it's easy to find information on that. So that's a new record for Coast to Coast, and I think people are going to still try to break that record. We should do that in the Clean Energy Show car. The Clean Energy Cybertruck, see if we can break the record from Coast to Coast. As long as we can write off our restaurant meals. Tesla is hit by a safety recall of all full self-driving beta cars over rolling stop feature. Brian, explain this to me, because this is something I don't understand.
Well, I assume this is related to the self-driving, where you, at a stop sign, you're supposed to come to a complete stop, but drivers don't, actually do that.
Real life drivers.
The car is programmed the same way to do a rolling stop, where it kind of stops at a stop sign. But apparently the powers that be took issue with that, so I guess they're changing it.
It's illegal. My brother has gotten tickets for that. They will say you were going X number of kilometers per hour at minimum, and but it's a hard thing to do. There's people, I live by a four-way stop, so whenever I leave the neighborhood, I have to go through a four-way, and some people, it's just like they barely slow down. It's like who's ever there first gets to go. And I come to a complete stop, even though I'm kind of approaching first, but no, because they didn't, they feel that they got to the center of the intersection first and get to go. It's a pet peeve. Makes me angry. You know how things make me angry. Well, they're doing it in Canada, by the way. There's also, like, the heat pump issue in Canada. The Transport Canada, the federal sort of branch or whatever of government, announced that the defect investigation is underway into Tesla Model 3/Y heat pump issues, and is seeking feedback from owners. So somebody must have complained.
Yeah, and so, apparently you can send your feedback to Transport Canada.
So Tesla says that it had 400,000 storm watch advisories, or activations rather, on Powerwalls last year. So let's explain that to people. Powerwall is Tesla's home battery pack for storing solar power from your roof or from power overnight when the power is cheaper, and then using it during the expensive time of the day, or just for power failures. But when you're doing that to optimize your bank account, it sort of has an algorithm which it'll do to use suck in all the solar it can and use it at the best time of day. But what the Stormwatch activation does is it says, hey, the forecast is for storms and you may have a power outage, so we're going to charge up your battery, because when we're doing it to make it the most financial sense for you, it may not be full when the power goes out. So this is something that applies to what happened last night where we live, and friends having no power for 15 hours.
Yeah, but if they had a Tesla Powerwall, it would have gotten an alert like the day before. It would have charged itself up to full, and then a better chance to last out the storm on battery power.
And those things are going to get better at doing it, and the algorithms are going to get better, the program is going to get better, customization is going to get better. It's a very interesting space, actually. I find it quite interesting to see how that's evolved over the last 10 years. Volkswagen has successfully converted its Zwickau, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct, plant from an ICE factory, an internal combustion engine factory, to a pure EV production facility. This doesn't happen very often, and it's a big good news story. While the federal rebate program was meant to help fill a gap in provinces without their EV rebates in Canada, the vast majority of federal rebate money, which is $5,000 at most, is going mostly to the provinces of British Columbia and Quebec, which is where most EVs are sold in Canada. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's partly to do with the kind of supply issues that we've talked about before. Because there's bigger subsidies in Quebec and BC, they get the most cars. So, Nissan, GM, they send all of their cars to those provinces, and it's a much easier thing to buy an EV there. So it makes sense that that's what's happening.
And finally this week, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has released a report looking at future energy storage needs for the U.S. electricity system. Now, it finds that it has little need for energy storage beyond 6 hours of duration until the 2040s, when grid saturation reaches 90% plus renewables. Very interesting stuff, and something that is a gray area for me that I don't know about. we're sort of wondering how these things will play out as we get to carbon neutral. Well, they're saying we actually only need 6 hours of storage per day in the United States, typically, until we get to 2040. And guess what? In 2040, there's got to be new battery technology by then.
Yeah, that's a long way away.
And it's got to be really cheap. If batteries are going down 20% a year, most years, that's a good news story, people. And if the fact that you only need 6 hours of storage until then, and it's complicated as to why, but you can look it up and do deep dives into that. And I'm sure we'll hear from some of our people this week. But that is our time, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, as always. Email us at thecleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and TikTok with our handle Clean Energy Pod. And if you like, and we encourage you to, please rate and review our show wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next week for our 100th episode.
Yes, see you next week.